Livy tells us about Lucius Tarquinius capturing a neighboring city using what he describes as tactics that were not honorable to Romans. I welcome you to my YouTube channel where I explore ancient texts, and ancient texts I mean texts that have been around for thousands of years, and I try to find interesting stories and tales in those texts. At the moment I'm going through the book From the Founding of the City by Livius Titus, or Livy, and it's a collection of books actually, and these books were written about 2000 years ago, and they cover the history of Rome from about 750 BCE to 0 BCE or 0 AD. If you've not subscribed, subscribe so that you don't miss any of the videos I upload. Plus, that will also help me reach a wider audience. Now, Lucius Tarquinius Superbus, as he's called, the proud one, was the seventh king of Rome. And he came after Romulus, of course, was the first king, and then there was Numa Pompilius, and then there was Tullus Hostilius, and then there was Ancus Marcius, and Lucius Tarquinius Priscus, his father, and then Servius Tullius, who was father-in-law, in fact, and then him, of course, the seventh king of Rome. And he came to be known as Superbus because he was very proud or arrogant. He was also the first tyrant king of Rome, and he ruled without being voted in, being approved by the Senate. He was the first king to rule that way, and he was very brutal. Livy describes how he ended up murdering almost all the senators and other citizens in the city or in the kingdom. In fact, anybody he felt like was a threat. It didn't matter whether it was family or a friend, he could just get rid of you. And it reached a point where he got rid of people who he didn't really have anything against them, or it wasn't really that you were to be a threat to him for him to get rid of you, but if he felt like you had something, he wanted piece of land or anything like that, he would just get rid of you. Despite his brutality and his arrogance, he was successful as a war general. That's what Livy tells us. And he did start wars with several neighboring empires and cities, and he was successful in most of those wars. It says that the reasons why he would start some of these wars was very interesting, but I think it was common in the ancient world. One of the reasons why he started these wars was to raise funds for his projects. In particular, the construction of the temple for Jupiter. This is a temple that his father designed, but he didn't get to build it. So Lucius Tarquinius Superbus, or Junior, decided to do this, and he didn't have the money, so he decides to attack neighboring cities and empires to loot, basically, and then use that money to build the temple. One of the cities he decides to attack is a city that went by the name Gabii. He goes to war with the Gabii people, but he doesn't succeed at defeating them using conventional war, that is. And he comes back home and he pretends like he's no longer interested in fighting them, but he is thinking of ways to go back and really conquer them, basically. And he comes up with a plan, and this is the plan that Livy describes as a fraud and deceit, and it was un-Roman. It was not honorable for Romans to fight a war where they used deceit or fraud. And I don't think it was only Romans, but most of the ancient kingdom frowned upon using deceit to win a war. In fact, I remember there's when I think it's the Latin or the Sabines came to attack Romans, and they used deceit, and Livy does tell us that was very unhonorable. Like, it wasn't something that the ancient people thought was something respectable. So, but Lucius Tarquinius Superbus decides to do this with the Gabii people. So what does he do? He picks one of his sons, the third son, who went by the name Sextus. He's the youngest of the three sons he had, and he sends him to the Gabii, and Sextus goes there and pretends that he's a refugee. And he tells the people of Gabii that he has had a fallout with his father, and his father is trying to kill him, and his father is a terrible. He tells them everything bad about the father. He kills people. He's now reached a point where he's even considering killing his own sons, and he tells them, me having a fallout with him, I'm fearing for my own life, and that's why I had to run away from Rome. And he tells them this, and he tells them that if they were not willing to host him, then he will just go and try to find other cities that will take him in. And he mentions Latium, Volsi, Aqui, Hanisi. These are some of the cities. He told them that if you people are not willing to take me in, then maybe I should go to one of these cities and maybe they will accept me. But he was telling them this as if he was telling them, I have something that you need, especially because you are enemies of Rome. Maybe information about whatever is happening in Rome, which you might use to beat the Romans. It was kind of like that's what he was selling them. And they admitted him to stay in Gabii, And soon he was, Livy tells us, he was even allowed to attend meetings of the National Council. And he joined the soldiers, and he started going out to do raids with the young people, of the young men of Gabii, that is. And meanwhile, he was trying to encourage the Gabii people to fight Rome. And he was telling them, whatever information I have about Rome can be very useful to you people, and you can use that information to overcome Rome. And he goes out to these raids with the young people of Gabii, and he does very well. And at some point they make him their leader basically, and he's very successful. They are able to loot and take property from other towns and neighboring communities, and he's very generous with these young people. He distributes whatever they collect to them without feeling that he needs to take more than them, and they come to like him because of that, and they now start thinking that he's an honest and reliable kind of a person. And in fact, the city ends up making him a commander. He's raising up, he's going up the ladder of leadership in the city. And in fact, some people started believing that he was sent by the gods to be their leader. That's how Livy describes it. When he was so sure that he had won the trust of the people of the Gabii, he sends a message to his father. And he sends a message to his father through a messenger, of course. Livy doesn't tell us where this person came from, whether he was someone from Gabii or he was someone that had come with Sextus to Gabii. He doesn't tell us that. But he sends him and tells him to go ask Lucius Tarquinius Superbus what he wanted him to do. Lucius Tarquinius Superbus doesn't give the messenger a message really. He goes with him to the garden, and this is a very interesting narrative. I'm going to do another video about this where I'm talking about this and a similar story that is told by Herodotus in histories. Lucius Tarquinius Superbus takes this messenger that has been sent by his son Sextus to the garden, and they are in the garden, and he starts cutting the heads of the tallest poppy heads. Livy tells us it was poppy heads, some kind of plant that was growing in the garden. So he just cuts the tallest ones, or any of them that he saw that was tall than the others, he cut it down. So he did this, and they leave the garden, and this messenger is just following him around. And finally, Lucius Tarquinius Superbus, or Junior, tells the messenger to go back to Gabii. So the messenger goes back to Gabii. He reaches Gabii, and Sextus asks him, so what did my father tell you? And he's like, your father is very weird. He didn't tell me anything really. He just went to the garden. He was cutting down tall poppy heads, and finally didn't tell me anything. He's a very weird man. But Sextus gets the message. The message was in that action of cutting the tallest poppy heads. And he understood the message to be, what I want you to do is to get rid of the most powerful people in the town, the most influential. And he starts doing that. And initially, he just uses false charges against targeted individuals he thought were like more independent in their way of thinking, or very influential at the same time. And he also started having some assassinated. He also used a lot of bribery, bribing some people that he thought could be bought, and he was having some sent away from the city and taking away their property. So for those who were assassinated and those who were charged and then maybe executed, he takes their wealth and he distributes it, or he uses it to bribe others that he thought were easily be bought. And he does this for a while, and at the end of it, the city is so weak because it now depends only on him. Nobody else is there to protect it. And at that point, Livy tells us that Gabii was surrendered to the Roman king without a single battle. That Livy writes, and I find this very relevant, especially in the world we live in. He says, the gratification felt by each of who received a share of bribes blunted the sense of the public mischief that was being wrought until, deprived of all the counsel and help, the state of Gabii was surrendered to the Roman king without a single battle. Like, some of the people in Gabii town were so selfish. All they thought about was them getting something, and they were bribed, and they didn't. That blinded them from what was actually happening. And I think even in our modern societies, things like that happen. There are people who are in some offices and they get bribed to the extent that they are blinded from what the person who's bribing them is trying to do.